we realize that there are a lot of questions, and we realize this from the amount of phone calls. I'm sorry? You can't hear me. Is that better? Okay, we realize there are a lot of questions that you have, and we did not take the opportunity after the verdict to answer questions. We were tired. We wanted to go home. So this is your opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, we'll go ahead and start then. Linda Deutsch.
Hi, I'm Linda Deutsch of Associated Press. You have sat through 13 days of incredibly intense testimony, most of it about OJ Simpson. Now that you have reached your verdict and you've come through all of this, can you tell us, what do you think of OJ Simpson and his actions in this case?
Well, I'll go first. I just think he's an ordinary man that made a bad decision. I don't have anything against him personally. I prayed for him before all this started. When I found out I was going to be a juror, I prayed for him during, and Stewart, and the attorneys and everybody, and I prayed for them afterwards. So I don't have any ill feelings, and if they walked out tomorrow, so be it. God's in control.
Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Kane with ABC Network News, World News Tonight. John, do you want me to ask you a question?
Please.
What was the single most important piece of evidence that caused you to decide that OJ was guilty on all counts?
I could take that if you guys want me to.
Sure.
There wasn't one single piece of evidence. There was multiple items that we looked at. There was multiple evidence that we considered, and we considered and considered and considered. It went on for hours. We looked at each individual, then we looked at them again, and then we even went back through and made sure for each count we had at least 2 to 3 things that convinced us, yes, this law was broken. So it was multiple things that we looked at.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Stephanie J. I'm with Fox Channel 5 here locally. There's been a lot of articles and a lot of talk that say C.J. Stewart was tried separately from O.J. Simpson, not as his co-defendant. Perhaps maybe he would not have been found guilty on all 13 counts. What are your opinions on that, or do you think it's straight across the board?
I can take that if you want me to. With the Nevada law is very clear, and unfortunately, he fell within the umbrella of that law.
Just as your opinion on that, and can you expand a little bit for me?
I'm sorry, my opinion on what?
Do you think that it swayed anything having them together versus having them, regardless? You know what I'm saying? Regardless of the law, having them tried together versus having them tried separately.
No.
Any change of opinion there?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Jean Casares, Mid-Session, Full-Length Court TV.
What tapes did you listen to, and how did you assess the tapes in comparison to the credibility or lack of credibility of the witnesses?
Do you want me to take that?
I think that's how we didn't.
We didn't really take any credibility of the witnesses whatsoever. We went first to all documentation that we had, video, tapes, voicemails, everything that we had, because we honestly felt we could not rely on that witness testimony. There's not one decision we made that was based only on witness testimony, period.
Ben Deasy with Channel 13, local ABC affiliate. Given what happened 13 years ago and decision in that double murder trial, how difficult was it for you to be objective? And as you go forward and make this decision, are you worried that people are going to perceive this as makeup for that, no matter how objective you are in making that evaluation?
As far as I'm concerned, there were 12 people that came together cohesively that never once entered our minds or the deliberation room. What was the end part of your question? I'm sorry.
Do you think that people are perceiving this decision?
They are, obvious. I mean,
Absolutely.
there's reports right now that we've had some kind of vendetta against Mr. Simpson for what he did, and that in no way had anything to do with this case whatsoever.
How do you feel about that perception?
It's terrible.
That's why we're here.
Bingo.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Steve Gregory, I'm with KFI Los Angeles. What about this kind of sparring between Mr. Galanter and the judge, and all the kind of the fireworks and the drama in the courtroom? Did that at all affect you during the day? And I mean, just the attorneys themselves, their actions, and anything like that?
That was expected.
Yeah.
It was expected.
think so. I mean, being a novice to the law, I just assume that's your job. You're fighting for, the person you're protecting. And so to me, that was normal.
I've never been on a jury service before, so it's a little shocking, but I figured it's pretty typical.
Did you feel like at all that the attorneys were sort of kind of constricted or didn't get their full opportunity at all at any point?
No.
We basically felt,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
no, we basically felt that that was his job to do, to defend his OJ Simpson. And for him not to stand up, he wasn't doing his job.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in today.
I'm Tori Richards with the New York Post. I'd like to ask the foreman, at any point were there any counts that you were leaning towards not guilty or maybe even hung, or did you argue back and forth about any of that, or was it just straight guilty and you had all had the same opinion?
In the beginning of every count, we leaned towards not guilty, and we researched to come up with the verdict of guilty.
But,
I mean, we presumed nothing was guilty until...
No, but I'm saying, was it ever, 6 to 6? I mean, some juries, there's a holdout and there's some sort of argument.
I will say that there were some bumps in that. It wasn't that difficult. I believe that the state of Nevada did a fabulous job with presenting their case, presenting us with the evidence, and giving us the tools, the laws to evaluate.
But when you said there were some bumps, could you be more specific, maybe what counts those were, or the charges?
A lack of knowledge of the law, really. It's like, okay, what does this mean? I mean, we had to actually go back and define what is robbery, what is a deadly weapon. We went back and defined those things based on the 49 pages of instruction we were given. So that's where the bumps came in. It's like, okay, what is coercion? We had to really define those things before we could make a solid decision. That's where the bumps came in. But once we had our definitions, we were solid.
And then basically, if anybody was at a fuzzy point, we stayed at that point, and we didn't move on until everybody was 100% sure before we voted.
There was no, we'll come back to it later.
Right, we stayed there until...
Thorough research on that one until it was set.
There were no holdouts on any kidnapping?
No.
No, ma'am.
And they're having trouble hearing you, so if you remember to hold mics up. Go ahead, Matt. It's okay.
TV. You say you relied on your documentation, the tapes you had, the videos, audio recordings. You could not rely on witnesses. I'm to assume it's witnesses who were cooperating witnesses as well as the alleged victims and Riccio. There was one conversation that was testified to. Am I correct to assume you did not rely on McClinton and Alexander's testimony that Simpson told them to bring guns, or did you believe them?
No, we didn't rely on them. We didn't rely on their testimony.
Then do you believe Simpson told them to bring guns?
Everything was based off of the recordings. Every piece of evidence we found was strictly off the recordings.
And the videos.
And the videos.
That's right.
Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah, Andrew Mullenbeck, KNX in Los Angeles. You made the decision to go 13 hours on Friday of making
I want to take this
Deliberation.
one. I want to
Why
take this
did
one,
you do
please.
that?
A couple of us are going to answer this, okay?
Right.
So go ahead, Renee.
We didn't make any decision whatsoever as to how long we were going to deliberate. We were stuck in a room with everyone out here waiting for us to get this done, and that played no part whatsoever in how we came to our decision. It was not on a time schedule, and it never was planned on being a time schedule.
And then I will add that at one point, the decision was made, we were getting tired. We'd been in here as long as anybody else in the courtroom had been in. Possibly there was a chance of going home and returning the next morning. As the foreman, I stated that I didn't want anybody to go home. There was a chance of the next morning somebody being involved in a car accident, a flat tire, anything to postpone that. Let's stay until we get it done. The 13 hours, there's not a clock in the room. We really weren't aware of it. That was coincidental.
And who even knows if that's true? I mean, who came up with the 13 hours?
Nancy?
Hi, Nancy Dillon with the New York Daily News. And the foreman, if I could ask you, which single charge elicited the most debate? Which charge was the hardest one to find him, or O.J. Gillis?
I can speak to that one. The someone want to speak to that one? Do you want me to take it?
I don't, you know what, I'm going to pass it to her.
If you guys agree with me, I would think actually conspiracy was the hardest one.
That was the
because
hardest one to define.
of the definition. It was so broad
that and
as to
kidnapping.
what constitutes a conspiracy. And the involvement before, after, and during the event was what we really needed to prove. It had to be at some point within that. So conspiracy, I think, took us the longest. It was easy to define robbery. It was easy to define burglary. But I think conspiracy was what definitely took us the longest.
Hi, I'm Janet O with the KLAS local CBS affiliate. Want to know your thoughts on the defense's argument, their plan to appeal the case based on the fact that they said jury members had, this fixed opinion of Simpson.
I think personally it's preposterous because they chose us. 500 people, I think, filled out these questionnaires. They chose us. They had the right to. So for them to tie in that there were too many women on the jury or we weren't the right color is really insulting because they're the ones that chose us for the jury.
Mr. Galanter?
John Getter with ABC News. I'd like to also thank you guys for coming down tonight and taking the time to talk to us. Those of us who sat through the whole trial didn't sit through it as you did, of course, but we too were rather struck by some of the characters involved and trying to understand how credible they would be to you who had to make the decisions as opposed to those of us who could just kind of sit and watch. And you've talked a little bit about relying heavily on the evidence and the tapes and so on and so forth. But would you expand on that a little bit? Just kind of take us inside as best you can the impact those tapes had on you. I'm thinking specifically of the way that the tapes were used in the opening statements so dramatically it seemed, and also the tapes that Mr. McClinton recorded at the Little Buddha dinner party. Can you just talk about that as much as you can and how you weighed that against individuals' testimony?
We pretty much just started fresh. We went in and just listened to the tapes with a fresh set of ears. I mean, listening to them in the courtroom, and having the transcripts, not having the transcripts. We just wanted to hear for ourselves. We didn't even go off the transcripts.
We didn't have them.
We didn't have them with us, and we wanted to interpretate everything on our own, so we would be unbiased, in our decision making. And when you listen to the recordings, it's very clear. It's very clear. That's all we can say.
What was very clear? What do you mean?
A lot of the statements made and who made the statements, the conspiracy involved after the event, it was just all clear. There's just no disputing it.
I'll be honest, we heard things that other people hadn't heard up to that point because we listened to it so many times over and over. We heard phrases in there, we're like, where did that come from? Because no one else caught it, not the defense, not the state, not the detectives.
In the end, we were able to insert words and blanks that they couldn't decipher before. We had heard the tapes that many times. Well, there's 400 blanks. I couldn't give you every example.
Sure. Can you give me an example and something that really struck you as like, oh, okay, now I get it. This is compelling.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I couldn't.
I have one phrase, but I don't know.
We listened to some of those tapes 6 and 7 times, okay, and we kept going back and forth, until all 12 of us heard the same thing.
I have a particular phrase if you guys are okay with it.
Yeah, go for it. We heard it.
Peace in the hall. We heard 3 times when in the discussion at Little Buddha, peace in the hall, peace in the hall. Did you pull that piece out in the hall? We heard it quite clearly, and we heard it more times than anyone else had heard it.
One other example was, and it became quite controversial in here, was you ain't playing my gun. That just doesn't make sense. Grammar school dropout doesn't use that type of language. It didn't make sense, but yet it was put on the transcript. And I think, I'm not sure if the jurors here today that made sense, but was it you, David, that actually, you listened to it, and I don't remember what we actually wound up hearing it as being, but it wasn't you ain't playing my gun.
What did you hear it meaning?
I just said, I don't recall exactly, when you listen to the tape, that part of it repeatedly, what it came out, but it became unmeaningful, as unmeaningful as the bad grammar, you ain't playing my gun. So, that definitely was kind of discarded from us, correct?
Steve? No, Steve Freeze.
Oh, sorry. I'm Steve Freeze with the New York Times. So much of this case, including the material involved, has to do with memorabilia and people trying to sell things related to OJ Simpson and this whole sort of trade, and also people on the stand who are trying to get book deals and trying to sell tapes and so on. So I'm curious. First, did any of you in the last couple of days get offers? Did anybody offer you? Did anybody planning to write a book? Anybody try to throw money at you to talk to TMZ or somebody like that?
I mean, nobody has made me an offer. I don't want any, but like I said, my phone has been ringing off the hook for the last 2 days. Okay.
I'm about to make offers to make it stop.
Brian?
Hi, Brian Haynes with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. You said you heard clearly on the McClinton tape Simpson saying, "Did you pull that piece out in the hall?" Was that the key piece of evidence that convinced you that he knew guns had been used in the robbery? Or was there something else that led to that conclusion?
Do you want to take that one?
The 911 call right after the incident was clearly said. They sounded very scared, and they said, "We were at gunpoint by OJ." And they had no reason. At that time, that person didn't know he was being recorded.
Oh, and Riccio. When Riccio made that comment.
Yeah.
Also, the video
They don't bring
footage
the guy with the
that we saw of the gunman that did go in with jackets buttoned as they went in and jackets unbuttoned as they came out. So concealed weapon, then not concealed. There were a lot of factors that went into that, but those were the main ones that I can recall.
We'll go to Ashley first.
Hi, I'm Ashley from the LA Times. Sorry for calling you guys multiple times.
She's Ashley.
I know. You recognize my voice, right?
Now we have your face, too.
You're in trouble.
So there was the odd coincidence of the verdict coming 13 years to the day after the acquittal. Was anyone even conscious of that?
Personally, I felt like I've been living on another planet for the last 4 weeks.
Amen.
And so I was not aware of that at all.
Most of the time, we didn't know
And
what
I don't
date it
think
was.
any of us really
Right.
were.
I mean,
Because you kind of just get into this rhythm of show up, go in the room, come out of the room, stay in here, go back in the room.
There were many days we
And
thought
so-
it was Friday and it wasn't.
Yeah. Me too. Or we're just hoping. Yes.
Yeah, wishful thinking.
Steve Berger.
Hi. One of the things the defense tried to paint was the actions of the Las Vegas Metro PD, and that perhaps that they were out to get OJ, and that they did, the transcripts were screwed up, and they purposely did all of that. Did any of that play a role in what you were doing, and how did you handle that? Did that even come up in conversation with you guys?
No, it never
No.
came up.
not at
No.
all.
There were mistakes on the transcripts for both sides, both the defense and the state.
And we were admonished not to
And we didn't
rely on
ever
the
use the
transcripts. In
transcripts.
They
fact,
weren't even
when-
in the room with us.
excuse me, when the tapes were even being played in here, most of us, some of us followed through just as a key with the transcripts. Most of us just listened. And I think because most of us just listened and not tried to follow the transcripts, we were able to pick out
You hear the true
what the tape was saying.
But then you heard in there, they didn't get him in L.A., we'll get him here. That was pretty clear. Did that
No.
do anything to you?
No.
Not at
That's
all.
not my opinion, so why would that affect me?
Exactly.
Linda Dorsch.
You have said essentially that you disregarded the testimony of the cooperating witnesses, the people who were there, the people who got extraordinary deals which will mean that they will not go to prison, they will not get the kind of sentences that the people who were tried will. Do you think that the prosecution wasted their time in giving these people these kind of deals if they were untrustworthy?
Perhaps.
Perhaps they did.
I don't do their job, so I really can't speak as to whether or not they wasted their time. I think they all worked very hard to do the best they could for their clients.
But do you think it was fair to give these people nothing, including McClinton, who brought the gun, in exchange for his testimony, when that testimony apparently didn't play into anything?
But that remains to be seen because the judge still has to sentence them.
Correct.
Exactly.
We're not sure of what nothing is, because they haven't, what is nothing?
Well, they won't be going to jail for life, you've been told that.
That's a possibility, but as far as the witnesses, we're not aware of.
wasn't our decision.
Right, that wasn't our decision. That's
But
not what we were here to
you
win.
did not trust them, is your final
Not entirely,
decision?
no.
Okay.
Michelle Kane, ABC. Mr. Weiberg, you said in addition to conspiracy, another charge that you guys felt was kind of difficult to deal with was kidnapping. Can you paint that picture for us and tell us what was so difficult about it and what the interaction among you was?
It wasn't that it was difficult. My version of kidnapping, I mean, I always thought kidnapping was that you had to tie somebody up and transport them somewhere else. Okay, so the law, after reading what the law was, it painted a clear picture into my,
Tell me why.
Why? Because it's in black and white. What kidnapping is. If you hold somebody against their will or lure them, then that's kidnapping. I mean, even if if you keep somebody in their own house and say, hey, you sit there and don't move, that's a form of kidnapping, which I didn't understand that until I read it.
Anybody else comment on that?
It was very clear that OJ said, don't let anyone out of this room. That right there is kidnapping. That's the law. We had no choice.
NBC affiliate. OJ's defense lawyers had given the analogy of he faces the same punishment as if he were to walk across the Bank of America, with an AK-47, duct tape all the tellers and stick them in a safe. What are your thoughts on that? That he used that analogy?
I actually agree with Mr. Grasso when he said that, but unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. We just had to follow the law and basically find him guilty on 12 accounts. I mean, I do agree with that. It's unfortunate that he'll be possibly facing the same charges as someone that would go in and rob a bank at gunpoint. And I understand his point, but that's not on us. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it is what it is. I mean, that's up, I guess, for the judge to decide from here on out.
I want to echo my colleagues in telling me we all really appreciate you guys coming out. It makes it much easier for us to do our jobs. And what I'm wondering is, this process has affected your lives over the past month. Has it been just like going to work, or is it a lifestyle change when you're going through an experience like this? And can you tell me a little bit about that?
I can take that one.
Go ahead.
Our lives have been on hold for a very long time. And to go from doing whatever you do for a living to sitting in a courtroom listening to legalese for 10 plus hours a day, it's a hard thing to do. This wasn't an easy task whatsoever, and it wasn't an easy decision, period. And it involved a lot of time and a lot of attention. I mean, I've got 3.5 steno pads full of notes. I mean, we sat there taking notes till our hands hurt. And it's like a different world. It's not something we are normally exposed to. At least personally, it's not something I've ever been exposed to. So it was completely different, and we put our lives on hold, literally. Our children, our spouses, everything was put on hold, and especially the night we made the decision. We couldn't make any calls out. I mean, and they're thinking, where are you guys? It's midnight. So it was a very difficult, very hard process, and it's nothing I ever want to have to experience again.
Let me go.
Karas in session, formerly Court TV. This is a follow-up to the questions that Linda Deutsch had and others about sentencing. Walter Alexander is getting probation, one of the gunmen. The others 3 testified up to 5 years, but in all likelihood probation for cooperating, assuming the DA believes they were truthful. I know it wasn't your concern sentencing. You did your job, but we all have opinions. What do you think OJ Simpson should get? Because he is facing 2 life consecutive sentences. What does he deserve for this, for these facts? He didn't rob a bank. He didn't tie people up. But what does he deserve?
I think that's reserved for the court to decide, not the panel of juries.
I understand. I agree. But we all have opinions. I mean, some people feel he should be doing life 13 years ago.
And that was my opinion. I think that's reserved for the court to decide. I'm not in that field.
The law is the law.
No, I understand.
I have a personal opinion. I honestly, if he walked out tomorrow, I'd be just fine with that. I just don't care. If he lives the rest of his life happily ever after, I'm good.
I feel the same way. I mean, I basically have no opinion. Okay, we did our job, and it's up to the courts to decide.
And that's why we were most likely chosen to be on this jury, because we didn't have an opinion, period. And we still don't.
I wanted to ask that one. So this is is kind of a follow-up to that. Were you guys aware of the stiff sentence, and at any time during your deliberations, did you have any type of sympathy about that, or you weren't even aware what the sentence could be?
We were not allowed to know what the sentencing could be.
Because they
We were
mentioned it
only allowed
several
to say
times on the stand, it's 132 years or it's life, and so it kind of slipped out several times during the trial.
But we don't really know. I mean, there's a minimum, there's a maximum, there's parole. We don't. I personally, I don't know about you guys, but I don't understand the law well enough to know exactly what's going to happen when he receives his sentence.
Did you, the lady right there? Well, she was going to say something.
Yeah, I do feel sympathetic, but that doesn't change anything. The laws that were laid out were the laws, and they were clearly broken based off of the evidence we had. And whether I feel sorry for them or not isn't going to change that.
Jean Casares, in session, formerly Court TV. There was some testimony in this case in regard to the civil verdict. Thomas Ruscio testified that they could not do this in California because of turnover orders. On the Michael McClinton tape, there was some audio about OJ saying that things were hidden and dispersed and others took it. Did you discuss the civil verdict at all in any capacity?
No, we never did.
Carl?
Carl Lieberwitz from CBS. How many of you watched the first trial 13 years ago, and did any of you talk about it or think about it during it? Not during deliberations, but during the trial. Did you ever discuss it, or?
No.
Never came up.
No. Never came up.
We were, we were very, very proud. I think every one of us were proud of all of us as well. Never came up. It, not in a sarcastic way. I don't even think it was in anybody's minds. For that, I can say that I'm proud of the jury.
Steve Freeze?
Steve Freeze again with the New York Times. I'm curious to know whether you think that had OJ or CJ testified during the trial, would that have mattered to you? Given that you're using all this like sort of hard evidence, would it have made a difference to you? Did you have questions for OJ?
No. No, I don't think it would have mattered. I know that just through his fame, we could identify his voice. In the case of Mr. Stewart, I don't believe we even heard him sneeze in this courtroom. So I don't think it really would have mattered one way or another.
Michelle?
Now that you guys sort of have your lives back, how is your interaction with your family and friends? Are people approaching you? What are they saying? What are you anticipating at work tomorrow for those of you who work?
I'll let you know in about an hour and a half.
Anyone else?
I don't think we've really had time to come down
Exactly.
from this.
No.
I mean, you're going to get 50-50 either way. I mean, 50 of your friends might agree with you, and 50 of your friends are going to disagree with you.
Are they plugging you for information?
Not at all.
No.
My friends can't get through to me on the phone for the sake of all of y'all calling me. Thank you, ma'am. But I will tell you that about 4 weeks ago, everybody that you see up here were pulled out of our normal lives, and this became our family.
Yeah.
We get along pretty good. We see more of each other in the last 4 weeks than we've seen of our families. Haven't seen our jobs, a lot of us, in that amount of time. So honestly, I'm looking forward to this being over, and I can go home and look at my children, extend my hand, and say, "Hi, I'm your father."
Speaking of which, we have understood that you all have become very close and have even been planning some trips together. Has this changed your lives forever? Are you now a new family that will continue?
Go ahead.
I don't think this has changed our lives forever, and I'm a person who meets people on a daily basis and gets to know people. I'm the person who blabs at you in the line at Starbucks, okay? I mean, this isn't anything that is going to change my life forever. I meet new people and bring new people into my life on a regular basis, and no matter where I meet them. So to me, this isn't something that's going to be an anniversary date. We're not going to get together and go camping every whatever day. I mean, I don't even know what day we actually came to the decision.
I don't either.
But that's just the type of people, I think that all of us are very similar people. We're talkative, we're friendly, and I just think that's the type of people we are. I mean, we found out that 3 of us have the same exact birthday. So it's just an unusual situation, and we're just all in one room together, and you just start to get to know each other after a while.
I will say I have a newfound appreciation for this process.
Mhm.
I never realized what actually went into picking a jury and having a jury sit and listen to testimony. So I do have a newfound appreciation for this.
It's a hard job.
Eddie?
Local NBC affiliate, I noticed as you were walking in to deliver the verdict that a lot of you either looked straight ahead and, very few people looked straight at the defendants. What was going through your mind? What sort of emotions were you feeling? Were you nervous? Were you
upset?
I was very nervous.
I was very nervous too.
I mean,
I've
regardless,
never done this before. Regardless of, we were all unanimous in our decision, but you're still, affecting someone's life.
A person's fate is in your hands,
Two people.
Yeah, two people.
and their family members, their
As well.
children.
It's not just affecting one person, it's affecting a lot of people.
That's right.
That's a lot to have when you're, thinking. You have that on your hands, it's overwhelming sometimes.
Ms. Eckhart, sorry to put you on the spot, but in your jury questionnaire, you were very honest. You said of the 95 case that you thought he did it. Can you explain how you put that out of your mind?
Did you see the second part that I wrote on there that I wasn't there, so I really can't say. So it didn't affect this case at all.
Do you think it could have played any
Not
part?
at all. There was so much evidence against him in this case. It just made no difference.
Getting back to the nerves you mentioned just a minute ago when you walked in, when you eventually saw the defendants handcuffed, what's going through your mind?
We weren't here, sir. We had left the room already.
They took us home.
The defense focused so much on their case about the state of mind of Mr. Simpson that he just wanted to reclaim his own property. How much did you discuss that aspect of the defense case?
Go for it. Not at all.
Well, I don't think that played into it at all. Unfortunately, he broke the law. Had you or I did the same thing, we would be where he is right now. Had he taken other avenues, such as civilly, or perhaps gotten the police to go with him, I think this would have been a much different outcome.
Yeah, I want to go back a bit to the beginning. When you got the case that was handed to you, you walked into that room, shut the door, and all of a sudden it's just you guys alone. Paint a picture for me what that was like emotionally. Kind of sit there, you guys all take one big deep breath and say, okay, where do we go from here? And then the circumstances around getting you as the foreman.
I think I became foreman because when we walked into the room, everybody sat down and I remained standing. I just don't sit generally. It's bothering me to sit here now. Really, I think. But there was some discussion wrapped around it. But how I felt when that door was closed, and we had two verdict forms, one for each defendant, Mr. Stewart and Mr. Simpson. Scared. Scared to make the wrong decision. Scared that for the defendants and their families. We're people. It's human beings that they choose for a jury, not robots. So we have feelings as well. It was very hard for me, and I'm a guy that I don't show much emotion in the 4 weeks we've been here, but it was hard.
Same question.
Pretty much Paul answered the way I was going to answer. So
We took this very seriously. We knew that two men's liberty was at stake, and there was no levity. There was no, we just kind of got down to business and said, let's take each count as in turn and see what we can make of this.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie J. again, Local Fox affiliate. I know you guys have been on a crazy emotional roller coaster ride, and again, we appreciate you guys being here. Is there anything specifically that you want people to know about you guys? How you reached this decision? What went through your mind? Of course, reports, people are going to say things, this affected their decision, that didn't. Anything you really want to drive home to people who have been watching this journey that you guys have been on?
Well, I want to say something. I think just from watching the media, we've been painted as an all-white jury that hates OJ, and that's just not true. It couldn't be further from the truth, and that's why I'm here today, to clear that record. That's just absolutely false.
And this in no way had anything to do, they want to keep going back to what happened 13 years ago, and that never entered our minds or the deliberation.
Well, yeah, thank you for being here tonight. But coming into this, 500 potential jurors, did you think that you would be here, sitting here?
No.
Had I thought that, I would have booked a cruise on that. Yes, ma'am.
When they read the names of the people, I had no idea who they were, in all honesty. Orenthal J. Simpson was a name that was not recognizable to me.
I recognized it, but I didn't think I would be picked.
You mentioned the strong evidence against O.J. Simpson, but you did not mention what the strongest evidence was against C.J. Stewart. And you also mentioned you had never heard him speak. He obviously was sort of invisible during this trial. What was the thing that convinced you that he should be found guilty on all of these very serious charges?
It's different for each charge, in all honesty. There's not one thing that makes him guilty on all of these charges, but the thing that really clinched it for me, and I think for a lot of other people, was he drove the car. He came out of that room with items that did not belong to him. He let people put these items into his car. He transferred these items from his car to another car and continued to lie to conceal the entire crime. So nothing fits all the definitions of the laws that we had to look at. But to me, that was the most evidence that really clinched in my mind that he was guilty. I'm sorry?
That's the robbery?
Conspiracy, robbery. I mean,
What
like
about
I said,
the
each charge is
kidnapping?
different.
Well, he held someone.
He was present in the room and kept someone from leaving against their will. That's kidnapping.
I mean, he didn't walk in that room and see what was going on and turn around and say,
I'm
"Hey,
outta here."
I'm out of here. What are you guys doing? I didn't agree to this." He didn't leave. He didn't decide that's not where he needed to be.
According to the law, that makes you guilty too.
Right, he's an adult just like the rest of us, and if he walked into that hotel room and saw what was going on, he could have turned around and walked right back out, and he chose to stay.
Or after the fact, continuing to conceal.
What was that?
I'm sorry, or what I said was
continuing
to conceal the crime after the fact.
Ben DC, local ABC affiliate. So I have to ask you, what's the weakest part of the prosecution's case here?
Go ahead.
For me, it was basically claiming that he was getting his stuff back.
Recovering
his stuff. And that's fine, but Nevada law states even if you
said prosecution.
I'm sorry. Oh, prosecution?
Trying to prosecute, what was the weakest part of the case they put together?
I can't think of one.
I can't think of one. I struggle to think of one. Again, I said earlier, I think the prosecution, the state of Nevada did a fabulous job.
Were you trying to say the fact that it was his stuff to begin with is something that was on your mind as far as weighing this out?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the defense team. Yeah, on the defense part where they were saying OJ was trying to get his stuff back, and that very well may be the truth, but under Nevada law, it just doesn't matter. Even if you're recovering your own stuff, you can't do it in the manner that they all went in and did it, and that automatically pretty much makes him guilty of robbery under Nevada law.
Hi again. I suspect that when your friends and so on find out where you've been hiding for the last month or so, that you'll be asked a simple sounding question, simple answer, but I'd like to ask you to take a stab at it, however many of you are willing to. That is, they're going to say, oh, you were on the Simpson jury. You convicted these guys. What was it like? Summarize, would you? You've talked about different aspects, but what was it like? How will you answer that question for your family and friends?
Well, I will say that there was a lot of discussion between us, knowing that regardless of the outcome, you're not going to please all. Mr. Simpson has a large fan base still to this day, and we just had to not think about that in making our decision. You know, we couldn't convict or not convict based on the popularity of a person. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
what it was like was a process I'd never like to repeat again. It's not something I enjoyed being a part of. I didn't want to be here. I didn't choose to be here. I was chosen to be here, and I did the best that I could with what I had.
Exactly.
Anyone else?
We should get a pardon from jury duty for the rest of our lives.
At least 10 years.
When this broke in the first place a year ago, you all just ordinary people who pay attention to the news or whatever it was. Did you remember hearing about this case in the first place, and what was your reaction at that time?
Blech.
Any of you?
I remember hearing about it vaguely, but it's nothing that stood out in my psyche. I just, you know what I mean? You see little runners on the TV, or you hear a snippet, and that's all it was to me, a snippet.
It was the same for me. I mean, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, and when I do, it's the same. You catch the little snippets flying across the screen, and that's about it. I didn't really tie two and two together until we came in here, and I was like, oh.
Big O.
Big O.
Excuse me, Beth Karras. It's very rare for prosecutors to have the kind of documentation that existed in this case. So if the Riccio and McClinton tapes did not exist, and you had to rely on Promong and Beardsley and Riccio and the 4 cooperators, and it's not unusual to use cooperators. Since you didn't believe them, I assume you would have acquitted without those tapes, right?
You can't really assume anything because it wouldn't have been the same case.
But you said you didn't. It would have been the same testimony.
It would have been the same testimony, but I didn't sit in on that case. I can only respond to what I had and what I helped to make a decision on. I couldn't really say what it would be like otherwise.
Okay, but you did say earlier when I asked that you discredited the witnesses and relied on the tapes. So without the tapes and discredited witnesses, isn't it fair to conclude
In my opinion, it would have been a weak case.
Yeah.
It would have been a very weak case.
How did they even come to trial?
But acquittal, I wouldn't say yay or nay on that because you can't really say it would be a
I
different
agree with
case.
Dora. It would have been a weak case.
Okay. Thank you.
You sat here for all these weeks under the strict supervision of Judge Glass. What did you think of her as a judge?
Love her.
I think she did an excellent job keeping control of her courtroom.
Yes.
She did a great job.
Were you all as cold as we were in here?
Yes. You didn't see our teeth chatter?
We had our little blankets up there.
I mean,
One of you said you loved her.
That was me, I'm sorry.
I mean,
You guys are taken over to see the Palace Station hotel room. I don't know if you're aware that they actually tried to create one in the basement here, and they decided it wasn't a good enough facsimile, so they took you there. The idea behind taking you there was to give you a sense of how small the room was, to give you a sense of whether OJ could have reasonably not known that there was a gun there, not there, whatever it was, and how scared some of these people might have been. Did going to the hotel room matter? Did that help you at all? Give you any kind of perspective?
Give us a good scope.
I think it gave us a really good scope.
right. I mean, it definitely was a very tiny room.
There was something about the ceilings. I mean, the ceilings were not normal height. They were very short. I mean, people's heads were brushing the ceiling, some of the taller bailiffs. I mean, it was extremely small. Rosso himself, his hair was like touching the ceiling. And it's like whenever you do anything, like when you want to lay out your front room and you draw a diagram, it's never exactly the way it really looks and feels in person. So I think it was better that we were there.
I want to ask you on the burglary count. Did you determine the burglary was the breaking and entering going into the hotel or into the room itself?
Into the hotel. With intent.
They were heading there with an intention to.
Hey, Chan with the local NBC affiliate. Did any of you have your minds already made up before you entered deliberation? It didn't matter what happened in those 13 hours. You knew.
We couldn't. We didn't really have the instructions before us until right before we went into deliberation.
Right,
so I think the way that the courtroom and the law is set up is actually very good because there's no way you could make up your mind. We didn't know what the true definition of a burglary was, or a robbery, or conspiracy.
Like he said,
or kidnapping.
But he thought
that was the most
kidnapping
surprising one of all.
Reading into it, it's like, wow, that as well is included in kidnapping.
There was no way to form an opinion because it was set up correctly so that we couldn't.
Follow-up question. So if someone told you to pretty much just decide right when you walked into the courtroom, I mean, you would say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Each one of you.
Exactly.
Did any of you really believe that OJ didn't see the gun in that courtroom when he turned around to look at Thomas Riccio?
That's not the law. It does not matter whether or not he saw the gun. The law is that if you commit a crime and the person committing the crime with you has a deadly weapon, you might as well hold it in your hand yourself. You're possessing a
If
deadly
he's
weapon.
aware of it right then or soon after.
But did you discuss that at all, or?
Yes,
was it-
yes, absolutely.
Yes, we did.
He at one time became aware that there
And
was a
it-
gun,
and-
before, after, or during the fact.
Okay, but did you have a discussion whether or not he saw the gun or not? I mean, was that?
Yes, we discussed that, yes.
Okay, then what was your conclusion?
In a space that small, my personal opinion was it would have been very hard not to see someone holding a weapon.
You guys were here for 3 weeks in this room in those chairs for all that time, and as you said, it was an emotional and draining experience. Just wondering, what was it like to walk back in here again in this setting? What did that feel like?
Well, we had to see Arthur.
Arthur became our new best friend.
Yes. It was a little strange.
If you never come back in this room again, will that be too soon?
We were,
That would be
yeah.
too soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let Paul get some sleep now.